Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. It is episode 9 of Right Side Up with Steve Staggs today. It's a Friday. Folks, what I've been thinking about is perspective. It's so helpful to have perspective, and it seems like each day, if you don't start it off right, sometimes you kind of get into a rut, and sometimes you get wrapped around the axle. People say, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Well, today I woke up on the right side of the bed. And you know what? Partly because we're making this thing right side up here. These conversations have been absolutely transformative for me. I hope for you. And you know what? We're just documenting this stuff because at some point in time, you know what? The Lord will lead people where He needs them to go. And so I hope this is a blessing to you. It is to me. And really, this has turned out to be something really incredible. I mean, I didn't imagine we'd be on episode 9. This will make 18 hours of content with Steve Staggs and just a couple of buddies, man, just hanging out, talking about Jesus and about, what's this all about? Why did He do this? Why do you exist? Why are you here? But folks, I'm going to share with you something that happened to me this morning before we bring Steve in, and that is a video. So I will occasionally walk in the morning right before the sun comes up or as the sun is coming up. And if you didn't see this on Twitter, this happened to me this morning. And this bird is usually there, but it usually flies away when I walk up to it. But I just pulled out my camera. And I thought, I'll just film this bird and see what happens in the background here. So how incredible is that? That doesn't happen every day, but it was almost as if the deer came in on cue and like stayed in my shot. I didn't move that at all. I was standing right there on the bridge and just I thought, oh, I'll just take the sunrise and this the bird that normally flies away. And here come these 3 deer, and it's like just on cue. And I mentioned this perspective for this reason. You know, um, I know someone that had a baby this morning, and I got a photo, and I saw that baby, and I remember my kids when they were fresh like that, fresh out of the oven, right? And it's like it gives you perspective. And so to start the morning this morning with this, and to say, hold on, the heavens declare, and I see this sunrise, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then I see this bird, I'm like, he's not flying away. This is really cool. And then to see these deer, the signs in all of this to the abundance of this creation that we live in, it feels like a garden, especially where I live. And so that's really helpful. It's helpful for me in the midst of everyone arguing about P-Hex is better than E-Hex. And it makes me think of Adam Sandler going, no shampoo is better. No conditioner is better. And, I think of all this stuff that's happened and I stop and I go, you know what? We are so blessed and I'm so thankful. But the big question is, why are you here? And that's really what has started all of this stuff. Why are we here? Why do you have the skills and the experience and everything that you've had? So, folks, welcome back. I want to say hello to you real quick, and then we'll bring Steve in here. Sam Kemp is number one. Bearded Saints back again. Bobby Hexelrod, my online ghost, Mike Lostel. Good to see you, man. Welcome back. You have been the power user of Stephen Friday. So good to see you. David Lee is here. Academaciated. Good to see you. Hex Glenn is here. Hornet UK1. Susie Q. Oh my goodness. How awesome to see you. And Cadium. Oh my goodness. So fantastic. And Robert Keller. Folks, welcome. Let's bring Steve Staggs back in. Welcome back to Crypto Heartbeat. What's up, Steve?
Yo, dude. How you guys doing?
Man, it's so good to see you. It's just so fun. You and I talk like, I'm like, "Hey, man, you got a couple minutes?" And next thing you know, it's like, "Well, that was an hour or 2 hours, chatting with you." And what's so nice is to have someone who loves to have these conversations as much as I do. Like you know, I'm so interested in
Yeah.
how things are made and why they were made and how I fit into that. And I was thinking? You've been a guy who's been in business, and you ever hear people talk about it's the highest and best use. Have you heard that? You've heard that term, right? It's the highest and
I've been
best.
using it for 40 years.
Have
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a really interesting place to start because I've been transformed by this relationship with you and this conversation of what you've basically said. Hey, let's dig into this and let's listen. And what's been amazing to me is that, you know what? I want to be used in my highest and best use.
Yeah.
And I think about all the ways I've kind of gone my own way in my own life. And it's like, well, I felt like, well, I have this skill or this ability, or I need to go train and do this thing, or, I need to go get this education. And, what's my purpose? And, I almost feel like in my own strength, I can connect a couple dots. And, you can do all kinds of things. You have this ability to make choices. But there's something about this journey of connecting with the very framework of creation that literally was created, since the beginning, that gives you this deep sense of highest and best use. And that journey, we use so many different metaphors to describe it, but this there's real benefit in this. It's not like there's no incentive. There's a tremendous amount of reward because there's peace and perspective in the midst of storms. That's how it feels to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've had a very, very, very similar experience and, in outcome. I remember when the Lord was first taking me out of my dream into his dream. I've shared about a little bit about that in past episodes. And he put me in business. We started a business. It essentially was the genesis of what today is sports marketing, sports branding, things of that nature. Back in those days, things were given away just to try to get people involved. And then so we started taking a different approach with it. But in any event, in what I found myself doing, because I didn't understand business. You and I have talked about how first time I got involved, I didn't know debit from a credit, and I thought the accountant made a mistake because he put the stockholder equity on the liability side of the balance sheet, and so that kind of gives you an idea where I started.
Yeah.
Uh, but what I was doing in an honest effort to try to become informed and educated about what this whole idea of business was about, that I read all the magazines, I was reading all a bunch of books about it. And what I realized or recognized at one point is my point of view was changing based on what I had just read. And boy, I thought I sounded really smart.
Yeah. Got all the jargon.
Yeah, I got the jargon. I've got the latest craze going on. I'm in the know, all that stuff. But I realized that, wait a minute, I'm just parroting what I just read. And oh, by the way, the reason they are moving and so volatile in their own opinions and what they're writing about is because they got to come up with new content every single week.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I saw the incredible instability that I was creating in the name of leadership
Hmm.
because I was a parrot of somebody else's point of view. With all good intentions, um, trying to do what was right, trying to be, diligent and responsible. And finally, it dawned on me, and I was talking with the Lord about it. Man, what about that? And so I said, hey, I'll tell you what, if you want me to be in business, I want to know how you do business.
Wow.
How do you see business, Lord Jesus? How do you conduct business? What does business look like to you? Why did you create it? And that's where I started in about 1982. And from that point forward, um, every day is a new day in learning an expanded, if you will, version of how he sees business and what its intentions are. And oh, by the way, once you get that point of view, now you start to understand why it is such, why it's so important to control business, and why it is the prize of everyone who seeks power. So anyway, that without getting too deep into it, yes, I'm totally with you. I've been in a similar experience, and that's kind of where my turning point came from.
Well, and you said early on in that, you said that, you know, you went and did the thing that you would love to do, right?
Yeah,
So here he gave you this opportunity to go literally all the way to the top ranks of professional baseball. And of course, you've mentioned in past episodes how much you loved baseball from such a young age,
yeah,
and that passion and discipline and made you a professional. And what I love is this context, because in some of your writing you talk about this idea of you know what it's like to be a professional in human baseball.
yeah,
What does it mean to be a professional when it comes to, you know, this life? And what I think is really cool that I've learned from you and has been so amazing to me is that, you know, this idea of, you know, so many people want to connect with the very, you know, form and function of the universe. I look at all the people that are scientists and all the stuff trying to drill down on everything. And it's amazing to me, the more deeply we get into it, the more mysteries and more questions there are. But we also see that there's a framework to how things are made. And, you know, I was just thinking about my son, you know, you know, and my dad disciplining me, you know, he's like, hey, son, here are the way things work. And if you don't understand how they work, and my dad always, you know, he always had a funny phrase or whatever. He's like, you know, take your time going, take your time going, but hurry back. And, you know, he'd have all these kind of, you know, phrases that he would use, but he'd be like, you know, he'd say things like almost kind of funny things like, you know, most people, he goes, you always show up 10 minutes early, son. And I said, well, why is that? He says, well, most people don't show up on time and generally they're drunk. So that was his attitude about things. He's like, if you're sober and you show up 10 minutes early, he says you're going to be ahead of half the people. And that's kind of how he saw the world. But you know what? In a way, he's a father passing on something to a son to help him understand more how things work. And we talked yesterday, and you reminded me, and it's always a constant reminder of the fact that you had asked him, right? Here's 1982, right? You're coming out of baseball, and you asked him, why did you make it all? Can you start there today with this idea of asking that question to say, is it knowable, right? The why, because I think most people within the church and what we see in kind of Christianity in general is we're starting at the middle, and very few times people start at the beginning and go, we do live in a physical world that is built on some rules. Well, there's a creator. Well, why did he do it? Like,
yeah.
why? And I think that you're asking questions that are kind of duh, but like maybe we should ask that question. But that's been kind of almost the beginning of all of this journey for you. And to me, it's been opening up so many amazing aha moments for me. Can you kind of share that context for folks that are watching and all that stuff of that initial kind of why question?
Yeah, sure. The For most of us, the most important um, questions that we ask, which reflect what we're really interested in knowing, are the what and how questions. What's going on? How do I fix it? Um, those kinds of things. Um, but to Jesus and what I've learned from him is the most important question we can ask him is the why question. Now, many of us who grew up in the church, boy, that's anathema. You don't ask Jesus why. You just white knuckle and obey, and
Get in
you
line.
do it. right? And it's like, it's not for you to know. Well, man, what a eye opener it was to find out not only does he want us to ask why, he is thrilled to answer the why. And and the reason is because the why is what gives meaning and purpose to our what and how questions. What good does it do if we ask what is going on if we don't have a comprehension of the context that what is operating in? Well, you could draw two entirely different conclusions based on the context of the what that the what is fitting into. If we ask the question, how do I fix this? Well, that how fits within the context of why that thing is broken to begin with. And then how do you correctly repair it so that it can function according to the way it's designed to work? So the why question, to Jesus is the absolute most important question we can ask him, because apart from that, his what and how answer means nothing to us. We'll take it off in a totally different direction. And I know that from experience. Oh, what's going on here? How do we fix this? And I go and I get the answer and I start, putting my hands to it and make it happen. And I look down the road somewhere and I'm all by myself and I'm going, Lord, where are you? You're the one, man, you told me. Well, Steve, no, I told you the what and how, but what are you doing way out there? Good question. Maybe I better answer why I'm way out here. Oh man, there's that why question again. So for me, what I began to learn is the absolute significance of why God did what he did, because the why gives meaning and purpose to virtually everything he does as a result. And then how I fit into that.
Yeah.
See? And so if I'm out of sync with his why, then guess what? He's doing one thing, I'm doing something totally different. Whoa, did we ever pause to think that that's exactly how we're taught is the right way to live in this thing that calls itself the church? It actually tells us that that's how life is supposed to live. We're supposed to go out there and do our own thing. See? Now, certainly in the name of Jesus, but it's still our own thing. And so tremendous change of thought process and perspective about why I'm even on the planet, beginning with, God, why did you build this thing?
Yeah.
What did you have in mind when you built this? What were you trying to accomplish? What was your motivation? Oh, by the way, in business, we ask that all the time, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How is it we don't ask him that question?
Yeah.
See? So that's kind of where it started. And
But
then there we could talk for another 12 seconds.
It's funny.
That answer.
What's funny though is when we first had conversation, right? So I'm kind of relating to anyone who's coming new to this, right? You've been steeped in this for 40 years, and I'm coming to this pretty fresh. And one of the things I think has been kind of the aha moment for me is that there were these key moments that you illustrated, right? You're saying, you remember this story? Remember when Jesus comes out of the wilderness, and Satan comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, I know you're hungry. Turn these stones into bread." And he's like, "Man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God." And of course, it started there, and then you started adding these things to it. And so, what I've kind of gathered from all this, and I say this every time because I want to just always say it, this thing that is impressed upon me from our conversations is that Jesus is alive and he speaks. And I think that I'm seeing everywhere I turn now, essentially, even though I don't think it's the core intention, I don't think that if I said to somebody, "Do you believe that Jesus is alive right now?"
Yeah.
and he speaks to his people, I think you'd say, well, yeah, well, of course, yeah. Well, we got the Holy Spirit, and then all these kind of references to Bible verses and stuff. But I think what's really, you're making a really good point about this why, because we started a lot in the garden, in this idea of authority and basically what happened there. What is this quote unquote fall of man thing that we talk about? And is that actually part of his plan so that we would be able to rule in his image and likeness, right? That we would be essentially agents of him. And what I think is incredible, what I've learned about this is all of these things that I've read in the Bible over the years are like popping out. And there's so much around him speaking and his voice.
Yeah.
And, just recently, and I haven't even mentioned to this to you privately, we put red letters, right, in the book when we read it. We're like, this is Jesus's voice, and I think about it, I'm like, well, why did you do that? And then, of course, I look at my kind of Bible church experience, and of course, I'm being a little bit, um, black and white or binary when I say this, but I've really felt like a lot of this is, we'll say that Jesus is alive on Easter Sunday, right? Oh, he's risen. Oh, he's risen. Yay. But the rest of the time, we're going to say, boy, that Jesus, he's a good guy. We'll sing about him. We'll do all this stuff. But there's this kind of veiled implication that he's a historical Jesus,
Yeah.
not an alive Jesus like all year long. And I feel like it's not like I wasn't aware of this, but this idea that everything I see in the scriptures is coming out like, hold on, if I were to hold each thought captive, and you said to me, like, if I were to say, hey, Jesus, what do you think about this? If I actually came to him and said, I hear you speak to people, I'd really like to hear from you. That intent alone
Yeah.
is the beginning.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's what I've been doing. And what's amazing about it is it's like the perspective has changed. And the perspective has changed to say, I mean, Steve, I've been doing this with everything. Like I'll be making a list and I'll be like, hey, Jesus, what did I forget? And it's like, oh, that thing. And it's really bizarre. And you go, he's not like saying, make sure you get the milk. It's not that. It's like, all right, what's this, understanding that, hold on, I can constantly be connected to you. And you told in the last episode about you sitting on the end of your bed talking to your kids when they're young and they're asking you all these questions, staying up late. And I absolutely love that picture. But you've also helped me see Jesus and help me see, God as a father who loves us and is so willing to engage with us and so willing to speak in all of these situations. And then, of course, I look back at my life and I go, wow, even in my quote unquote disobedience, which that's, I know, the wrong term, he's always been there to even in like to guide these things and to provide and all of these things. But it almost feels like when I read your writing about amateur versus professional, it's like I almost feel like he's inviting me into
Yeah.
like a professional rank, almost like you were invited into like, hey, you played t-ball and then you played, probably at school, but then you went to junior college and then you got drafted, but you didn't make it to the show yet. It's almost like I feel like we have this conscious effort in practice of literally saying, all right, if we understand that he's alive and he speaks, that I don't have to go through some middleman, but he's going to make all the connections based on what he's created. And so rather than me muscling it, saying, I need to go find my purpose and I need to go do this thing. Well, maybe Jesus is saying to me, hey, Matt, if you built some more muscle, you'd probably get rid of that diabetes you have. Right. And, but it's not like, well, I'm going to go get buff so that somebody can see me looking really good or whatever it may be. But this kind of inside out approach to, hey, he knows what's best for me. And what does it say? What without faith, it's impossible to please God because you have to first like admit that he exists and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Well, hold on a second. There is a reward, and let's earnestly seek him. And I feel like what you have done for me, Steve, is rather than saying, "Hey, listen to the Bible according to Steve." What you basically said is, "No, no, no. Why don't you ask him yourself?
Yeah.
And that to me is such a powerful thing. And what I love about it is you didn't say to me, "Hey, let's get you saved, son." And what I love about it, it's so refreshing because I've always heard people say, this is the good news. But somebody also said, if it isn't good news for everyone, it's not good news.
Yeah.
And you think, well, is it good news to the Muslim? Is it good news to the prostitute? And it is.
Yeah.
It is good news. In its core form, it's good news.
Yeah.
And you go, well, hold on a second. So you knew me and you made me and you have a plan for me and there's purpose and there's value in this. And what I keep coming back from is like this restful piece of knowing that he's doing something and I'm following him. And so I just like summarized everything I've learned from you, Steve. And it's like big things is to say, chill, bro, like
Yeah.
relax and walk with me in this and listen and ask me and I will guide you. So you don't have to go kicking down doors. I will open them up. And you know what? It's almost like as I've relaxed in that,
Yeah.
it's like things have opened up and almost like they've blossomed rather than squeezing them. I know
Yeah.
that's a lot. What are your thoughts there? Because one, thank you, but two, I think this is why we're doing this conversation. Is I want to, if I know where there's this truth, I want people to be aware that you don't have to go through the gauntlet and hop on one foot and say these certain things in order to have this engagement. And I feel like that's what the church has told me is you have to be a certain type of person or you're not acceptable here. And it's like, no, 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 come to me. I don't care who you are or where you are. I'm available.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Matt, that is great. And um, it's fascinating. You were talking about perspective and, when we first started and you identified about in your little summation there, you probably made reference um, to probably 6 or 8 core perspectives that we are taught that are absolutely backwards from what is real, from
Yeah.
from the perspective of the kingdom of God and why God created these things. And I'm not telling you these because I had drew some great conclusion out of all this studying because I'm so smart. It's because I held those same points of view, and literally many of them I would have been willing to die for. That's the kind of guy I am. But the Lord said, no, let's take a better look at that. Because if our why point of view is skewed, then we'll act according to our skewing, if you will. So take the first one, for example, the fall in the garden. We have been taught our whole life that man fell in the garden. The fall of man. Well, what if that wasn't a fall at all?
Yeah.
What would that do to our point of view and what this is all about if that wasn't a fall at all?
The implications are completely different. It like
Oh,
changes your whole, yeah.
it's like you're taking an about face. Oh, gee whiz, what do we call an about face? Can we call that repentance?
Yeah.
No, we just go in one direction. We turn around and say, whoa, hold on, dude. No, that's not right. But something is wrong with that point of view. If I hold that man fell supported by the translation of God being sorry that he made man, and so he had to condemn the entire planet to death because God was sorry that he made his man. What does that say? See, that says a lot about mankind. What we never ask the question of is, what does that say about God?
Mhm.
Okay? If he made something that he regretted making, then was that a mistake? Was that an error? Was that some malfunction in his ability to create? See, all of a sudden, what it does, even that perspective starts collapsing everything that we say and hold true about who God is. Well, no, you just declared that he's not any of those things. If you say that man fell, that man is the guy who screwed up God's gig, that God was so pissed off about man that he had to whack him in mass. Oh, gee whiz, now he's a mass murderer. Oh, man. What does that all mean? See, we don't pause to think. Every single thing that I just mentioned has a why component to it. Okay? Why'd you let the serpent in the garden? You could keep man out of the garden. In fact, you stationed angels with flaming swords to make sure man didn't get back in the garden. Why didn't you do that to keep the serpent out of the garden? Not the serpent, but Satan, who occupied the serpent. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? Oh, gee whiz, now I'm stepping into the meaning and purpose for that whole engagement in the garden. Oh, so man really didn't fall, did he? That was the means by which he became like you, knowing good and evil. Now the game's afoot.
You know what's amazing is
Whoa,
it is.
hold on here.
Well, and that's why this is so pivotal, is this why, but then also this core beginning. Because this is so true. Like if you're planning on going somewhere, but you start from the wrong position,
Yeah.
right? And you're just a couple degrees off, you're gonna be way off.
Well,
And to think that this is this core story, and what is the story that we've been told? We've been told, yeah. And if there's a God who makes mistakes, then he's not sovereign. He is not in control of all things. And when you think about it that way, that's a tough question that no one's ever, that I've never heard a sermon on, I've never had teaching on, is this idea of we just use the fall as this kind of, just accepted term. Now, certainly there was a change, right? But when you've defined this, which I think is absolutely so powerful, is this idea of the transaction between, Eve and the serpent, and that this authority shift. Because you made a comment that I thought was so good, and you have like thousands of these, I think, of these questions like, did they know what death was? There was no context for them. So if they were to say, and the serpent did say to her, like, you will surely die. No, you won't surely die. You didn't even know what death was.
what is that?
What? Yeah, this
That's
curious.
a philibin.
Yeah.
Well, what's a philibin?
Not so sure. Well, and that's what I think is so interesting, is that if people are, intellectually honest and want to come to this and say, all right, what is the story? And here's the thing, why I do this on this channel and why we've done this 9 times is because this has been confirmed in my heart and in practice in my life as true.
Yeah.
And I'm not coming to this to say that it has been taught falsely intentionally. But what I am saying, because I've heard the semblance of this, but it's almost like it's confusion versus intentional deceit, right? This isn't like I'm trying to lie to you. And what I've also seen is amazing transformations in the context of the church. So I don't want to just disregard it and say, no, I've seen some miracles within the community. But the neat thing about it is what you're saying is Jesus isn't in the mess. He's out front. He's strategic. There's a story that is unfolding that was decided long, long ago. And you were decided long, long ago. And this idea that, hold on, the whole context of this is this journey to understanding our relationship of who we are in him. And you said early on to me, you said, you've forgotten who you are. So can you go back over this? Can we stay in the garden for a second?
Sure.
And the thing that busted my brain one of the first times we ever talked, he said, hey, let's look at the Hebrew. In the beginning, God created. And the word God, and I went back into it and I looked at it too, and you're right, there's 2 words there. There's not just one. There's Yahweh, and then there's the Elohim.
Yeah.
And, when you start peeling this stuff back and you go, hold on a second, the intent creating us in his own image. Wow. For what purpose? Can you talk about that in that context of creation in the garden, of the purpose as you see it, as you spent time with Jesus, of what are why he did this?
Yeah, sure. Um, the first thing I'll share is that um, virtually everything I'm talking about, um, I have told you and your audience both that I'm not some whiz that's able to kind of discern this stuff and figure it out. No, no, no. These are you are observing the direct result of conversations with Jesus that I've had, that I'm now passing on to you, that by the way you can have to pass on to others. See, that's why, man, go talk to them yourself, because it doesn't matter what I tell you, it won't have 1/10 of the power and impact on you of anything that I say. What I say won't have impact. What he says to you will absolutely blow your head off your shoulders, because it is so profound in its implications, but yet so simple in its idea and content. It just is, the simplicity of it is what is so profound about it.
And I want people to know that are watching this that that's the reason we're doing this is
Yeah.
because I'm not interested in following any man. And what I mean by that is any person, no gurus. I'm not following a pastor, I'm not following a religion, I'm not following a denomination. And what is so refreshing to me, Steve, is ever since like moment one, you've constantly pushed back on me and you said, hey, why don't you ask him for yourself? And so
Yeah.
that's what I respect most about this is that you're like saying, "Hey, I've been doing this and I've been seeing the fruit of this and I've been coming to this understanding. There's some amazing things that Jesus has told me. But you know what he's done for me in this whole I've asked him myself. And he confirms this with peace in my heart because there's so many situations in my life where I either have peace about something or I don't. And
Yeah.
there's this general sense of it. And I'm like, okay, when I've got that sense about things, it's not often wrong. And you start going, hold on, this isn't quite right. Well, that's an indication. Hey, we need to dig a little bit deeper here and ask these questions.
Yeah.
And we've gone through some things. I've had some what I think are tough questions for you, and you're like, hey, dude, what did I tell you at the beginning? Ask him yourself. And that's why this is so refreshing to me. So, folks, the cool thing about it is Steven selling books, folks. He's a guy who's been on a journey and said, "Hey, I'm called to share this stuff," and it's just because it's so incredible. Because I think what it does is it links you and connects you to like all of the possible connection points for like everything you've ever done, everything you've ever been involved in, and it's a fullness of not only life but of and it's weird because its result is peace, not money, right? Not resources, a peace in the context of all of this, but then also revealing this is why I made you.
Yeah.
And this is almost like God saying, this is the vision I have for you. If you'll stay connected to me and get your stuff out of the way. I've got so much to share with you, right? Come to me and ask me. And that's the thing that's so joyful because he really actually feels like a father. And to me, to have a worldly father who's passed, it's like, hold on a second, this has a whole new meaning. So keep going, please.
Well, at its most basic essence, it's the difference between talking about God being a father and experiencing him as your father.
Yeah.
Talking about Jesus being Lord and experiencing Jesus as Lord. Talking about Jesus being your brother and experiencing him as your brother. Preaching about Jesus, us being Jesus's friend, and actually experiencing what it is to be his friend. Man, those are universes apart, and not a one of them can be known without experiencing them personally. And unfortunately, what happens is there is so much intention to tell people what to believe, and so little intention to say, go to the guy you say you believe.
Wow.
Just go to him. If he's worth believing, then guess what? It might be worth asking him why it's worth believing. Why should I be believing this? John 3:16, right? It goes up behind every sporting, for God so loved the world. Has anybody stopped us? Jesus, what did you really have in mind when you said that to Nicodemus? I know what we say you said. See? Why didn't you say that God sent you? For God so loved the world that he sent me. Why didn't you say me? You know how to talk. You know how to speak. Why didn't you say me? Good question, Steve. Come on, have a seat. And then off you go. And what happens is you start experiencing him as your friend who's telling you things that he knows is going to light your fire.
Yeah.
Because it lit his fire. After all, he's a son too. See? So now back to your question about all of these things, the garden and what you're talking about. And it all is wrapped around this concept that you began with about, if your why is different than his why, you're going to end up in the wrong direction. You're going to end up someplace else. So if our perspective is out of line with his perspective, we're going to end up someplace else. So if you were the guy who was trying to control the entirety of God's creation, where would you begin? By screwing with people's conclusions about who God is, who you are, what the whole plan is, what this thing is all about, and how you live this thing.
Wow.
You'd screw with all of it.
Yep.
And you do it in such a way that you become absolutely convinced that it's the truth that you'd be willing to die for. The greatest deception is the one that you give permission to function in your life because you call it truth, not deception. And wow, that's the thing that God starts unlocking by asking these little kinds of questions that he's asked me that I passed on to you.
Well, you said earlier today, or yesterday, you said, you've heard that the wages of sin are death. And you said to me, and I absolutely loved it because it's so powerful. You said to me, well, who pays wages? And I think I said, I guess the one you work for. He's like, why are you working for him? And you think about this, God's wages are not death. So whose wages are death?
Yeah.
And the wages of sin is death, then we're working for the wrong guy.
Yeah, why working for? Why you keep doing it? Quit working for the dude. If you don't like death as the wage, as the pay for what you do, stop working for him.
Well, and that comes back to authority too. You think about this idea that I'm in your employ, I'm under your authority, I do what you tell me to do. And of course, packed in that is like this massive truth bomb. Like you've handed me like this hand grenade. You pulled the pin and it's like, bam. Hold on a second. There's so much wrapped into that to say, hold on, I have given my authority over to these things that I think are good, but they're deceptions in many cases. And the thing about it is almost like it's almost like Jesus is the greatest at untying knots. My wife always gives me their necklaces that have been like all tangled up, and I put on my magnifiers and I could pull them apart. I'm like, he's the greatest at untying these tight knots that we've tied up ourselves up in.
I have these friends, Stan, Gene, Steve, Joe, a bunch of these guys. And we talk about this tying knots, untying knots all the time.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, exactly what you're describing. They're probably, if they're listening to this, they're probably chuckling on, yeah, we know all about those knot tying and untying, things, because it is absolutely true. We are tied in knots and we don't even know we are.
Yeah.
See, we call it truth. And yet we don't take a step outside of it for a second and say, let's see if that's really, Jesus, how do you see that? We're repeating ourselves about for 500 times over these episodes. How are you seeing that? And the significance of that question indicates our interest in seeing it differently. And Jesus says, okay. Now, what did he say to the Pharisees who weren't interested in seeing things differently? Because you say you see, your sin remains. Hey, Steve, if you've already drawn your conclusion about what's there, then why in the world are you interested in what I have to say? You've already chosen to operate apart from me. You've already chosen, exercised your choice to abide in your perspective. You certainly have the prerogative of doing that. It is a way to live. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is a way to live. You can. And so this whole concept, by the way, this is called misdirection. The entirety of the planet, as we have observed it, is one massive misdirection. And so it begins right from the document that we hold most sacred. And so now we've kind of gone a little bit on our typical rabbit trails all the way back to, right from the beginning. In the beginning, God. Now, in the English, the fourth word is translated God. So when you go in, and anybody can do this, you can go in and look at the definition of these words. The words that we use in the beginning, the definition of those words actually speak of the chief beginning in time, order, and rank. And so it is speaking of a beginning of which began to set the stage for everything in terms of its time, order, and rank. Well, I don't know about you, but that adds some depth and dimension to this concept of beginning. See? Now, when it does, what it inspires in me, the question it raises in me, well, God is in the beginning. Well, where were you in the beginning? What existed prior to the beginning? Because what this is then talking about is the creation, form, fashioning, and shaping of the creation. So what existed before the creation? Now, what's sitting in between those two things? Chief beginning. Okay, folks, I want you to pay attention to this. That's why I use this word, and it will transcend every language will possess these components. These ideas of being the chief, and that it relates to time, order, and rank. By the way, we're not talking about what has been created. All right. Well, something had to exist before these things were created. And in the middle of this is this word, Elohim. This word Elohim is translated God in English. It picks up on the Greek Septuagint word theos. It is God, as we know, is a singular word. Okay, speaks of one. And yet this word Elohim is a plural word. So if God is the right word to use, English word to use to translate Elohim, then the proper translation would be in the chief beginning of time, order, and rank, the gods formed, shaped, and created the heavens and the earth. God, you just blew my mind. Not only did you blow my mind, you blew my entire theology. Jesus, why is God singular used there instead of gods? Or maybe asked a different way, why did you have Moses write a plural word if you intended for him to speak of one God. Why did you do these things? Interesting you should ask. Boy, there's that why question again. Doggone it. Interesting you should ask. Steve, take a seat. Let's kind of look at this thing. Are you really interested in knowing the answer? Well, if you don't give me the answer, I'm going to go crazy because I can't go past the fourth word.
Right.
I can't go any further than that fourth word, English word, unless you answer that question. Because the answer to that question then sets everything in motion from there. And if that one isn't right, then nothing after it's going to be right.
Well, what's funny is in the church, what
Wow.
people always say, well, that's the Trinity. The Trinity was there. Jesus was there. The Holy Spirit was there. The Father was there. That's the Elohim. But that's not what it says.
Mm.
And what I think is the implications of all that are big when it comes to those first three words, because of this nature of I really, what sticks out to me is the term rank, right?
Yeah.
Because it really reflects order and
Yeah.
responsibility and authority. And to think that, hold on a second, so what has Jesus told you about this term, the Elohim?
Yeah, great. Well, and you're talking about time, order, and rank. Each of those, in and of themselves, is profound because one of the things that you learn about Jesus is he can say so much with so few words. It is, again, and I know we're overusing these terms, but mind blowing.
Yeah.
In how he can pack so much into so little. So, in the chief beginning, you could spend weeks with him just on that concept of time. Oh, why did you create time? What is the purpose and intention of time? We talk about it all the time. It's described throughout the scriptures. We use it, crap. We even build little devices that we put on our wrists so we can tell what time it is. See? Oh, and then what we do is we assign different times to different things. What is this time thing all about? Why did you create time? There is nothing that exists that was not first created. Okay? Okay, in this heaven and earth dimension that we're talking about. Why did you create time? Order. What is order all about? Oh, yeah, doing things properly, but is that what you're talking about when you speak of order? Rank. Whoa. Are there different levels of authority within your creation? Are there different orders of beings in your creation? Are there different dimensions and functions of time in this chief beginning of creation? You see the questions that come out of just those first three words?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It just, whoa, okay, let's get comfortable.
Yep.
Let's get comfy and start sitting back. Jesus, I'm all yours, man. Let her rip.
Well, and what's so nice about this too is you'll never exhaust this conversation. And the well is deep and you'll never reach the bottom. But in a way, that's the profound proof of the majesty. That's the profound proof of the sovereignty, right? Because a lot of times you kind of, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? Oh, yeah, it's the guy behind the curtain. And it's like, womp, 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 womp. You're like, dang it. This is one of those things that it just continues, right? And I think that that's so interesting. Here you've been doing this for 40 years and it's still fresh for you every day.
Every day, every minute of every day. It never, by the way, time ceased to exist as we understand it once you start plugging into this because it is absolutely a new experience every day. By the way, it's one of the things I enjoyed about baseball. See, because every day was different. And not
Mhm.
only every day, virtually every inning was different. Every out was everything, every single event that occurred within the context of that game was brand new. See, now I did executed certain plays the same way. There were a lot of things that were common within those, but the dynamic was so unique into itself. And that's the way it is with Jesus. Every single moment is unique unto itself that builds on all the unique things that preceded it until there's this massive thing sitting in front of you that looks so huge and profound, and yet it's so very simple.
Yeah.
Now let's go to the Elohim. Okay. In the chief beginning of time, order, and rank, the Elohim. Well, Jesus, I thought there was only one God. Well, Steve, who is God to you? When you use the word God, what do you mean? Well, I think of the supreme being. Okay. If that's how you are using that term, then yes, there is only one first. Why is he supreme, Steve? I don't know why he's supreme. Let me tell you why he's supreme. Because he is first. Nothing preceded him. No one preceded him. He is the first. And out of him, all things came. Everything that exists came out from him. So, Steve, this idea of creating something out of nothing, that's your concept of creating. There is no such thing as no thing. It all comes out of him. And then he sits me down, at a restaurant. I'm looking out the door, out the window, and I'm looking at all this stuff going by. This massive activity of life that's happening. And then he says, Steve, where'd all that come from? Now, it's a fascinating thing to have him ask you, where did this come from? And then all of a sudden your eyes are fixed on this astronomical amount of stuff and things and activity that is going on right before your eyes that you don't even pay attention to in most days. But when he captures your attention with it, it's like, oh, wow, man, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. There are a lot of things out there. Well, Steve, do you know why those things are visible to your eye? Because my Father saw them before we ever began. And everything he saw, he put in the dirt so he could one day teach you how to take it out of the dirt and make the thing that you are observing and using in this present moment. Who talks like that?
Right.
Who thinks like that? I certainly don't talk like that. I don't think like that. But that's how Jesus thinks about stuff. So, okay, Jesus, okay, I get it. There, if God is that, then why the plural word translated with a singular word? To hide, distract, and distort. To hide, distract, and distort. Okay. I think I get those words. To hide, distract, and distort what? How I design my kingdom and my creation to function. Change that, and you change everything. Redefine that, and you redefine everything. Oh, okay. Now, what I'm describing to you, I'm describing this interchange, right? And then the question comes in the midst of that. He's fabulous asking questions. Steve, who benefits from that distraction? Who benefits from that distortion? Do you? Whoa, I don't think so. Do I? Absolutely not. Then who benefits from that? Has God said? And right from the beginning, what we see is we see not only what happened in the garden through the serpent. See, that through the question, has God said, that opens up the entire beginning to redefining not only who God is, but what God said, what he meant, and as a result, how we then view God and how we then act in response to our view of God. And man, we're off to the races.
Wow. They're talking about a bunch of knots.
Oh my goodness.
Well, and think about that knot.
One knot.
Yeah,
Untangle that one knot,
yeah.
and the whole thing opens up clear as a bell.
Well,
and
and
it's
that's
like, wow, how simple is this?
yeah, that is so big. So, okay, so let me just say back to you what I think that knot is. So you think about this first documented distraction or lie. Let's just keep it simple. So Satan comes into the serpent, and what is the first thing? It isn't the offering of, it's actually planting the seed in your mind that he didn't say what he said. And that basically the distortion of what you heard him actually say.
Yeah.
So the first documented knot that was tied was to question the one who spoke to you and make you go, basically, you can go your own way. You can make your own decisions. You can do your own thing. What is incredible about that, though, is that this was all a part of the design as well, right? Is that you have to have this choice. And I think that it's amazing to me. It's amazing when you do untie that knot and you recognize the fact that, hold on a second. And I don't want to get ahead of you in any way, but I think for the sake of like my own understanding is you said to me early on, you're like, we've forgotten who we are.
Yeah.
If you untie that knot, you have to face who you were created to be.
Yes. And who your creator actually is.
Yeah. And what's amazing about it is it's so much more technicolor than what it's ever been presented as. And it's more exciting, to be completely honest with you, because I think this idea of, if I believe the lie that, well, you just fell, you're just corrupt, you're just broken, and you ruined my whole plan right from the beginning, man. I was having a party here and you guys just decided, you bratty kids decided to ruin everything. We can never have anything nice, and it's like, hold on a second. If we untie that first knot, what are the implications for who we are in him?
Yes.
And that's, to me, that's what I've experienced, Steve, through all of this, is that, hold on a second, I'm rightly relating myself not only to the framework of his voice and direction, but then also to the very framework and design of creation. And I think that where the peace emanates from, because everything else is like on the bias. It's like I'm constantly seeing resistance and there's friction.
Yeah.
And this untying this, you go, hold on a second. My yoke is easy, my burden's light. Well, wow. So really, so you will make the connections that are needed. You will direct the path. I can continue to ask and seek and knock. So the implications of untying that first knot and understanding actually the first deception of what that was, that we ended up giving our authority away. And the implications of all of that, we saw good and evil, and we are like him. And you said this before, and I want you to also kind of, because there's some things that are so fundamental, like this idea that we are the only ones in this creation that exist in the physical and the spiritual. And that's a really profound idea. But I think most people don't see it that way, right? We got this limited view and we're like, do we really operate in the spiritual, Steve? Um, and it's clear that that is something that is extremely precious because it is in the image of God himself. And he is one who knows and chooses. And this idea of choice is such a powerful, powerful idea. And the question is, what are you going to choose?
Well, think about this. Think about the implications of what it is to have choice once you get beyond the idea that I can do what I want. Okay. If God gave you choice so you could do what you want, now sit back and look at what would happen if 100 billion people who pass through the planet go into the eternal state, spiritual state of eternity, and every one of them are exercising their choice to do whatever they want to do. What would that look like? See, well, we can see what it looks like on the planet here right now.
That's right.
See, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see what the heck is going on there. So, okay, Jesus, why did you give choice? Why was choice so fundamental to what you gave man as part of his attributes, as part of his makeup as a being? Why did you do that? See, each of these again, we're back to our why question.
Yep.
Well, Steve, it kind of goes back to your Elohim question. You asked me why they put God there. Well, once God is assigned to that word and you view God as the supreme being, the first, then what do you do with that word? Well, I know exactly what I did with it. I asserted it was God and I left it alone. I would not touch it because there was only one God. See? And I was told that in the beginning, God created one. Well, Steve, do you see that right from the beginning, what is happening to you? You are instantly operating in falsehood. Right from the beginning, you are operating in a false impression of not only me, but how I created my world, my creation to function and operate. From the third word, you are now entering into distortion. You're now entering into falsehood. You are now entering into lawlessness. And you haven't even started your journey yet.
So let me ask you this because I want to clarify something because
And I need to say this one last thing.
go.
And you won't touch it. There is a defense put around that to where you will not even approach it because my name has been assigned to it.
Mm-hmm.
You won't even approach the subject. It is a done deal. Now, by the way, what I'm talking to you about would get people burned at the stake.
Oh yeah.
For centuries. So anyway, now your question.
Well, I was gonna douse you with some gasoline and light you on fire. No, so I want to make sure there's some clarification here because I think it's really important. You established prior to this, you said, hang on, who was first, right? And what I've taken from all of this too, in my own study is there's this one, and would you agree that Yahweh, the term Yahweh, is the first? Or not?
No.
You wouldn't. Okay. So then let me ask you this. The Elohim.
Now let me answer that
Yeah.
qualify that just a little bit. Not in the way that I understand Yahweh, but the way that you understand Yahweh. I think if we were to unpack that a little bit more, then the answer would be yes. And the point I'm making is see the way what we assign to words to mean I'm going to interpret what you say based on my definition of the word.
Yep.
You will use that word based on your definition of the word. Now, remember what Jesus did with me the first time. Steve, what is God to you? What does that word mean to you? See? Now, I want to untie a knot here, which says, okay, your question is about Jehovah, Yahweh. Now, the way I understand that, no. The way that you understand that, probably so. So let's make sure that we get back to that when you after your question.
Well, and that's the learning that we do whenever I talk to you, right? I
Yeah,
ask these questions that are tough questions for me, right? So, for example, when I see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane having this conversation with his father, is he talking to 32 gods or is he talking to one?
yeah.
What do you say to that? Is he talking to 32 or is he talking to one?
He's talking to his father.
Right. Is
One.
his father more than one or is his father one?
His father is one.
Okay. So that's good. I'm glad you didn't say the
The
father's
first.
32.
His father is the first.
Okay, so but that's really important here because
Yeah,
what you just inserted is a potential knot.
yeah,
So I want to clarify that knot. This idea of order and rank and time, how I look at this term Elohim is it's packed with so much. Because here's the thing that I think I take from this. What I've learned over all this and what God has confirmed for me is that I am in you and you are in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. When you come and you are ordered with me, not just my friend, but when you are truly listening and following, recognizing that I'm out front and that this plan and this purpose you come in an alignment with, you become me. Meaning, you are a son of the Most High God. You are in the line of Melchizedek. You are
yeah,
Jesus's, right, brother. You are in this line. You are the attributes of me in this world, i.e., you are the Elohim.
yes.
Meaning, so I want to make sure this is really careful because
Okay.
what you basically said at the beginning is a bunch of gods made man. And that would be an incorrect understanding of this in the sense that, hold on a second. What I sense of it is we become one with the many because he created those in his image that are like him. And we see things as separate of going our own way, which is this part of our view of the not of I'm independent and autonomous. But no, in reality, the extension of your creative ability, which is your image, and coming into the likeness of who I am actually means we're one and that we are one and many at the same time. And that you have this separation because you live in this time, in this space. You're limited by these things. But what you're understanding is as becoming an agent of me, that actually, if we're actually doing this the way I designed it, there's almost no difference between us because I look at it as superconductivity. I look at it and say, hold on, I am just a conduit because when I become aligned with you, it's actually you. It's
Yeah.
not me. And that actually what is me is actually this product of giving away my authority to the one who distracts. Is that fair?
It is fair, but I would offer in my experience that there's a step further. You no longer think in terms of you and me, you think in terms of us.
Wow.
See, uh, Tom, Jesus, just show us the Father and it is enough,
Right.
right? You talked about this guy every day, every moment that we're together. You say you don't do a single thing apart from him. You say you only go where he tells you to go. You only do what he tells you to do. You only work when you see him working. You and he are one, all of this stuff. Would you just show us this guy? You've been talking about him
Yeah.
for 3.5 years. Would you just show us him? And Jesus says, have I been so long with you that you do not yet recognize me?
Mm.
If you see me, you see my Father, for we are one. It's the point is, it's no longer a me and him, it becomes an us. This is that whole dynamic we've talked about, this partnership dynamic. See? And by the way, you can't be partners under compulsion.
Right. Oh, that's
See?
huge. That's huge.
You can only be a partner by granting permission, by choice. See, you can only be a partner by choice. That's the only way partnership functions. Otherwise, it's not partnership, it's compulsion, it's power, it's rule. See? And so if you see me, Philip, you see the Father. We are one. I choose to be inseparable with and from him. He chooses to be inseparable from and with me. We are one. Philip, do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Wow.
No, Jesus, I don't. Philip, do you want to understand what I'm saying to you? Right there, interest.
Yeah.
Are you interested in knowing this? That's why this whole thing, back to the Elohim, is so profound and powerful. We've forgotten who we became, who we are, because we don't know who we are. See, one of the things that I would, that you haven't shared with the audience in that whole discussion between us, you've forgotten who you are. Well, the follow on to that was, well, Steve, who are we? If I've forgotten, I'm not even sure I know who I am. Who are we, by the way?
Yeah.
If I have forgotten, who have I forgotten?
Yeah.
What have I forgotten? When Jesus asked me that, I had no answer because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I did not even know who I was.
Well, and
I did not know who he made me to be, not just as an individual, but part of an entire group of beings.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about this? This flies in the face of the very nature of how we teach about Jesus.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna drill into this because I'm observing this. We talk about when something happens in our lives that is just miraculous. We don't have the words to describe it. And one of the things I've often said is, and people talk about God winking at you, and then you go to tell somebody, you're like, Steve, this thing happened. I want to tell you, and you're happy for me, but it happened to me.
Yeah.
And I have so limited vernacular but like, I'm trying my best to describe. It's kind of like this, and it's kind of like that. And you're excited for me, but also that it's so much more rich for me. Because
Yes.
it was custom tailored and designed
Yeah.
for me. And what I sense in all this, and I want to make sure that those that are watching understand this too. Steve has always been he's saying, I've asked him, and this is what he said to me, but don't take my word for it. Ask him yourself, because this whole thing is an invitation of your interest.
Yes.
And what I like about this is, rather than how the church is saying, come on down front and you need to get saved, Steve. And when I was 12 years old, I went to, the Sunday school class, and I went to the youth group, and I wanted to fit in. And what the kids did that fit in went down front, and they're like, "Oh, your life's going to be changed." And I went down front, and everybody, some sweaty guys like praying with me and stuff, and I look back at that, and I was like, "This is just a bunch of hokiness." Oh, sorry. This is a bunch of hokiness. That may actually continue to go off. My daughter's calling in. And what I think is so powerful about this idea, and I think the challenge to everyone is to say, I almost feel like it's like I'm playing T-ball and you're with the Toronto Blue Jays at times, right? But also recognizing the fact that not all of us were designed to be second baseman. However, this deep well is a journey that we're all on, that you're inviting people to be interested in. I'm super interested in it. So what do? I call you, hey, Steve, you got some time? Let's chat about this. And you're like, hey, this is fun. Not everybody is there. But I think that the main thing that I get out of this, which makes it so accessible and so fresh, is the fact that it's custom tailored for you. He's a father who knows you and loves you, and is one who wants to engage you if you're interested.
Yeah.
You don't have to pray some certain prayer or hop on one foot. No, no, no. You just have to be interested. And I think that that's the thing that I hope people gather from all of this stuff is that it's not that I wasn't interested. It's that I think I acted as if Jesus was historical and dead because he was not in my field of view. And then I didn't realize that, hold on, this speaking component, hold on, it was spoken into existence. And then we had a conversation yesterday about this idea of hitting a baseball.
Yeah.
We don't think about the mechanic. We just hit the baseball and we visualize where is this going to go. And in that, we rule over the baseball. And that in this life, you look around at all these things, you're saying these things were created by the Elohim. They created by those who speak it into existence. And so now when I look at all the new agey people that smell like patchouli oil and walking around in sandals, hugging trees with their dreadlocks, is I have a commonality and I recognize these people saying, hold on, we can manifest our future. Well, you're just recognizing the very nature of who we are created to be, that we are like him and we speak things into existence. I mean, you know, so there's so many different analogies of all this, but then I
Yes.
look at the scriptures and I'm like, he even said to us, yeah, the spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is in you.
Yeah.
And that's just it's so powerful. And I think that on one hand, it's like I'm just learning to snorkel and like you're making me a free diver. Like I can't hold my breath that long, Steve. But these are big ideas. But I just want people to know if there's anything in all this stuff is, do you have an interest? And if you do, and you're honest about coming to it, get ready. Get ready because it opens up.
But well, it does open up, and you've experienced how we'll talk about something, and right on the heels of that, you'll find yourself smack in the center of an experience that blows your mind when you're in the middle of it and you're observing the very thing and experiencing and exercising the very thing we've talked about.
Yeah.
Well, that's how he does it.
Yeah.
See, he invites you in, he'll introduce you to something, and then he'll take you immediately into the experience and say, okay, see, that's what I was talking about. Now here's the big picture for me, Matt. And then I want to come back to this Elohim thing because it's,
Yeah.
you said something that's really, really important that we need to unpack and clarify so that there's not a distortion of interpretation of
Right.
things.
Right.
Because let me tell you what, there are a lot of folks hearing this, and right now things are happening all around them that are trying to distract them from hearing what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. We're going to go back there right now.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go back there right now. When you assign the word God to Elohim, there is only one honest way then to interpret or translate Elohim.
Right.
Okay. If I'm talking about our fourth English word. Okay. If that word Elohim was dog, and it said dogs was the Hebrew word for dogs, how would we what word would we assign to that Hebrew word dogs, plural word dogs? Wouldn't we assign the English word dogs,
Yeah.
plural?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We wouldn't take the plural Hebrew word for the four-legged animal and assign to it a singular word, English word. We wouldn't do that. Why? Because it's dishonest.
Yeah.
That isn't what it says. So we can't, on the one hand, we can't assert within the Christian community that the scriptures are infallible and inerrant and then translate them as if they are.
It's inconvenient for us.
Whoa. Instead of going back and saying, okay, Jesus, why'd you do this?
Yeah.
But so if you are going to translate Elohim honestly, notice I'm not using the word correctly yet. I'm just
Right,
using
right,
the word honestly. If you're going to be honest in the translation of Elohim, which you know to be a plural word, then you have to assign to it a plural word. And if you determine that God is the right word to assign to Elohim, you must translate it gods.
yeah. Well, and here's I'm gonna pull this up actually with the reference that you're making so that it's literally on the screen. So if you wanted to go look at this yourself, you could do that. So this is what he's referencing, right? So these are the Hebrew, this is the Strong's lexicon. These are the right in the beginning, first, beginning, best, chief, beginning, first, chief, choice, part. And look at this. Elohim, we've used the term God in our translation. This is the Hebrew word Elohim, and it is a plural, masculine plural noun, rulers, judges, divine ones, angels, gods, plural, intensive singular meaning, God, goddess, godlike one, work or special possessions of God, the true God. It's interesting how much there is there that is wrapped up in that. Keep going, Steve.
And entire religions are built on this.
Yeah.
And it's 100% wrong. So instead of stoning each other and slicing each other to shreds, or feeling like there are, ill intents in this thing, why don't we just sit back and say, okay, what are you talking about here? The Elohim. Why did you have Moses use a plural word if you intended to speak of the singular God? Steve, your answer is in your question. I didn't. I had him use exactly the word that I wanted him to use, because I'm describing to you how my creation not only was built and who built it, see, why it was built. I'm describing to you that I have this very complex community of beings that I've created, that I've assigned all kinds of responsibilities to do things. And I incorporate them in my work in the same way I incorporate you in my work. And so they've been assigned a task. Now, you know what's fascinating once I went into that? Do you know that Elohim, which is the plural word, has a singular word called Eloah that is singular? So if God wanted Moses to use a singular word for, in that, there was a Hebrew word available to him, Eloah, and that word Eloah is contracted to El. Oh my goodness, we see that all the time.
Yeah.
See? So it's not as if there was not a word that God could have had Moses to use when he wrote those first four words in English. See? He had the words. He said exactly what he said. Steve, I have said what I have said. And Moses was faithful to put down exactly what I asked him to write. Elohim. Now, ask me why I used that word and who the Elohim are. Now we're starting to get to your question, to the depth of your question. Elohim is not God, is not a title like God. Elohim is a class of beings. They are the ruling class. So once you now let's go back in the chief beginning of time, order, and rank. Guess what? Now we're starting to see what God had in mind when he was using those words. Steve, I have a whole class of beings that are set up in place to do things.
And throughout the scriptures, we see them.
It's written something like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's something. We'll get the Jehovah Yahweh here in just a second to answer that second part of your question. But it seems to me it's like 2,500 times in the Old Testament Elohim is written. Maybe it's 2,800 times. I can't remember off the top of my head. On almost every single instance, it's translated. See, it's translated as God in the singular context, and yet it is a plural word. Well, if you went in there and in every single instance you just applied the same, were consistent in that, then the scriptures would read entirely different to you. Here's now where we connect Jehovah. You asked me about what is Yahweh the first. No, Yahweh is the Son. Yahweh is Jesus, is the Son, is the Word. Okay? He is the Word, okay, who became flesh. And when you see here, you see constantly throughout the entire Old Testament scriptures, you see that Yahweh, how we pronounce YHVH or YHWH, okay? We pronounce that Yahweh, but that Jehovah is the name of the Most High of the Elohim. So when you see the name Jehovah, you see Elohim associated with it the majority of times. Okay, now let's get really simple about this, because this can get complicated to us unless we keep it very, very simple. Jehovah, when we read the Old Testament scriptures, we see this word, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, Lord. And that word Lord is used by the translators to replace Jehovah, YHVH, YHWH, Yahweh. And so you see things like the Lord God. Well, actually, what that is saying is Jehovah of the Elohim.
Wow.
Okay. So wherever you see that, and then other times you'll see Jehovah, Adonai, Elyon, Elohim, those sequence of words, and it's Jehovah, Adonai, Lord, Elyon, Most High, Elohim of the Elohim. So Jehovah is the Most High of the Elohim, this class of beings called Elohim. This class of beings are the ones that the Father vested with the attribute and authority of ruling, of choice. They are the ruling class. So when it said, in the chief beginning of time, order, and rank, the Elohim, formed, fashioned, and shaped his heavens and his earth, what he was talking about is, I have a class of beings in whom I have vested the authority to create with me. All things that you see have come out of me, and then I entrust those to them to bring those together to manifest the very thing that is in me, that is in my vision of what my creation is to be.
So what term is used for the Father then? When Jesus is talking to the Father, who is he talking to?
Well, that's what's fascinating about it. He calls him the Father. He calls him the God. Okay. In the Greek, you're asking because now we're referring
Yeah.
to how the Greek language is constructed to communicate. It uses the definite article to distinguish one as distinct from many. He calls him the God, and he also referred to him as the one who is greater than all. So when we want to talk about the Father, then if the Father was Jehovah, why didn't Jesus just call him that?
Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating that the term that Jesus himself used most often, almost exclusively, was Father? Not one time did he refer to him as Jehovah.
Hmm.
Why didn't he? See? Jesus, why didn't you refer to him as Jehovah? Because he's not, Steve. He is my Father.
Wow.
He is your Father. He is our Father. He is hallowed above all. He has no name. There is no name that is comparable with his. He is the one that you address when you pray.
Okay. This
Well,
is I didn't expect it to go here, Steve. So this is really no, I mean, it's like what's really cool is, most things I assume we've talked about previously before we get on stream. This is one we haven't. So folks, this is fresh for me in some respects as well. So let me I'm going to extrapolate this into just it because it makes some really interesting things make sense to me. So I'm going to bring some bizarre stuff to the table here that actually fit into this. So Moses is up on the mountain. He gets the 10 commandments. What is the first one? You won't have any more other gods. There's one. The Lord your God is one, right? So here's what's really interesting. If I go out east and I go to India, I see all kinds of gods. If I look into the book of Enoch, I see all kinds of gods. If I look into the Sumerian kings list, I see all kinds of gods. If I watch Marvel movies, I see all kinds of gods. The stories of history, of myth, of mythology, of a time past before the flood, all of these things. I see all of these beings, giants, people with supernatural powers, capabilities, strengths, all of these things. And then in the New Testament, I see, oh, yeah, Michael comes along. Hey, right? Angels. I see in the throne room of God, those who have eyeballs on their armpits. There are
yes.
all kinds of creatures beyond all of this, of course. And then in our current day, we're like, hold on, there's things in our atmosphere that we don't know what they are, and they are clearly intelligent, and we're trying to make sense of all these things. And you look back in the 1500s, and there's a woodcut that shows, yeah, in our town, there were these things, Vimanas or whatever, fighting in the air. There's so much of these stories. And then you go into things like Graham Hancock stuff, and you're like, oh, yeah, all of these people said, yeah, there's this one who came from the sky and told us how to do stuff. And all of these cultures and all of this evidence of those where there were what I would say in this context are the Elohim. Now, some of those that are created also have been, because we have the story of the flood, those now Genesis 6:12 makes so much sense, right? The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive and basically took them as wives and had the Nephilim, right? And you think about this idea of, hold on a second, there were those that were in the high holy heaven, right? And it says in the book of Enoch, it says, why did you leave the high holy heaven to come down to defile yourselves with the daughters of men? And of course, it had the list of the names in the book of Enoch and all this stuff. And they were literally judged and cast into the earth. And I start thinking about this concept of who are these demonic forces and all of these that are that may be Elohim. I don't have knowledge of that. But there are so many other things that we're not aware of because we are so limited to think, hey, we're all alone here. We just descended from a monkey and that we're here. But this creative aspect, and we've talked about this before, Jacob and Esau, right? This birthright. right? That there seems to be this jealousy within the rank and order of God's creation, that those who are given the ability to create and be in his image and be fashioned and conform to his likeness, because you have that ability to rule, there are those that don't have the ability to rule that in some cases are jealous of your rank and position in this kingdom.
Yes.
And it's hard to imagine this, but you've talked about distortion. Well, what's the distortion? It's completely upside down. The
Yeah.
whole nature of what we're talking is this right side up, upside down thing. And what's fascinating to me is the animals, right? Like in just kind of in our culture today, you know, how we treat human life, right? It's almost like everything is literally upside down. Animals are more important than
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
And then, what do we do to people? And then, women and men and then God, right? Like there's the order of things is upside down. But what's amazing about this idea is that if you did take that word of many to one, the distortion and the knot that has been tied there is to say, hold on, there is so much more here. And I think that as we look at those that are kind of
Yes.
in the scientific world that are looking out there and saying, hey, because people are talking right now, Steve, that this summer is going to be the summer of disclosure. And this is from the scientific alien group of people. Oh, yeah, the extraterrestrials and aliens and all that stuff. And what's really interesting is if you look at the Bible from my perspective, this has been clearly described previously. We're about to encounter and understand more than we understand today. The science community or whatever calls it disclosure, but we're going to come into a new era of understanding that, hold on, it's not just us monkeys. And that to me is going to really, really challenge people's ideas because they have literally been raised in this idea that, yep, it's just kind of, it's me, Jesus, and you fellas. That's all there is here. But if you really dig into it, and the church doesn't want you to dig into this stuff because it's like, well, it's too much for us right now. We got to kind of lowest common denominator this stuff and share it so that everybody can kind of feel good and go home. But if you really dig into this stuff, it actually fits together with, I think, a lot of things that people would consider heretical because they just don't have the ability to square it in their theology, but in their minds. And you see now that we have access to all this information, it becomes so much more rich, but it could also add to the potential confusion because I could see Satan using this to really, really confuse people.
Well, he's going to use it the way he's used it from the beginning, as God said. See? No, he didn't say that.
Yeah,
You're not going to Philibin.
right.
That ain't going to happen to you. What's going to happen is you're going to become like the Elohim.
Yeah,
See? And what happens in the religious community? They think that is the essentially the unpardonable sin in the eyes of many is that you think you are now God.
yeah.
No, no. It's you only have that point of view is because the word God has been assigned to Elohim. That's
Well,
the only reason.
I mean, now it makes sense too when you
You
think
take,
about. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Okay, so back to Satan saying to Eve, no. The Elohim knows that in the day you eat, you will become like the Elohim, knowing good and evil. Well, guess what? She was already an Elohim. See? So what did Satan actually offer her? His version of what an Elohim looked like. And in his version, the Elohim man, both male and female, were lower than the angels. And they were assigned to the class of animals, who was the lowest class in the order of God's created beings. Okay? Oh, so that's why you said, that man was made for a while lower than the angels. How did that happen? Okay. How did that actually happen? Now we can get into the whole dynamic of ruling, but now I'm also understanding why the Lord had me pause and go back to the Elohim
Yeah.
deal. The bigger picture in this whole thing is that we would recognize who we are with Jesus, because it is to us and him together that was given this planet. Okay. And so we see this planet in a bunch of, I mean, there's a bunch of crazy stuff going on in this planet that you have to be virtually loco
Yeah.
to be thinking that anything intelligent is going on here. Well, it's because the silent invasion is occurring, and we are being taken over. And so, okay, let's assume that a bunch of folks, from planet XYZ come in, and there's a big disclosure, and they're going to take over the planet. What are we going to do? Well, we better do something different than what we see happening with our own country right now. See, because we're rolling over and playing dead.
Yep.
See? What the bigger picture for me is, folks, hey, out there, do you know who you are? You are the Elohim. You are the ones that God has entrusted this planet to. You alone have authority to rule this planet, and there is no other being that has the authority to rule this planet without your permission. Are you granting permission for these wackos to rule? Are you granting permission for these, whomever they might be in this disclosure? Are you granting them permission to land on this planet? If you're not, you better learn who you are.
Yeah.
Okay? And it begins with saying, Jesus, what about this?
Hmm.
What is this dude talking about?
Well, and what's interesting is there's so much fear, right? All of these things are meant to control us, and it's amazing what some people believe, right? And then I also like look into the deep depths of this, and I question even what I believe. But then
I
I
get you.
also, but then I also am I keep coming back to the reminder that this is personally custom tailored for you,
Yeah.
and I feel like what I'm doing with you is I'm getting a taste for what professional baseball's like. That's how I feel about it. If I were to keep an analogy, it's like I don't have your bat speed. I don't. I've never hit a home run in a major league ballpark, but I can certainly learn a lot from your experience. But what I love about this is, hey, ask them yourself. Do this. Drill into these things, and in a way, I think we're so accustomed to someone telling us what to do and telling us what it is, rather than investigating it ourselves with him, right? With him.
Yes.
And that's the thing I think is really, because a lot of what this is, you're challenging my very constitution, right? There's some things that are core, but I'm really open minded. And also because I have interests in all these other areas, it actually makes it make more sense. Like, honestly, like this way makes it make more sense, because every time I think I know what God's doing, he does something better. Like I get this idea of what he's going to do, and he may have given me a hint of it, like, "Hey, well, let's talk about gold," or whatever it may be, and then I realized I was like, "Whoa, is that what you meant?" And it's like, "Oh my goodness, it's way beyond." Like I didn't even have the context to understand what you're about to do, and so this anticipation of this relationship that gives me peace, and I move forward in a way to say, "All right, highest and best use."
Yeah.
Use me in the highest and best use what you created me for. And what I hear in all of this is understand who I made you to be and
Yeah.
what power you do have to rule. But it's not power to rule apart from me. And you said this at one of our earlier ones. You said in his nature and character.
Yeah.
And then you also said to bless and to
Protect.
protect.
That's the nature of authority, to bless and protect.
So I think that that's an awesome way to kind of put a cap on this, is to say in his nature and character to bless and protect. Okay. Now when I think about this community, this crypto community, I kind of had forgotten that this is crypto heartbeat for a second. Here is this group of people that I'm so enamored with because they're so real and so authentic and so willing.
Yes.
It's like I almost feel like I'm sitting with the folks that Jesus ate with. He's like, "No, come on in, let's eat." And they're like, "You're eating with those people?" What I love about this community is, I'm reminded of things like love covering a multitude of sins, but also the provision in a time of not understanding, right? That Jesus has been here with me, custom tailoring things for me for 23 years or my entire life, even though I didn't understand the plural of Elohim. And that's what I think is so mysterious and wonderful about it is that it's not based on intellect. And that's the thing that I hope people are encouraged by is this fact that this isn't reserved for the Steves of the world. This is this is who we have been made to be, one
Yeah.
who is connected to and listening to the one who created it all. And I think, you come into line with that, like if you're somebody who has, and I've felt this way so many times, Steve, where I'm like, I have no capability to manage this thing myself. Right? Like I've run out of all possible options. I've screwed this whole thing up so many times, and I keep on, I I keep on running after things that will like self-medicate or things that will distract or things that will just, like I don't want to know nothing. Put me back into the matrix. And it's almost like this is a journey that blows your mind on a regular occasion, but also I think the best thing to say would be it's not easy, but it's right. It's not
It's so
easy,
real,
but it's right.
and it's real.
Right.
I mean, as Jesus starts bringing you into it, it is real, and it's tangibly real. I mean, you're describing how just in the conversational part of it, how it's making other things that you and I have never talked about
Yeah.
that Jesus has gotten you involved in other areas and other times and other places. All of a sudden, this is informing some of that and helping that make more sense.
Yep.
Well, I don't know any of the things that you're talking about there, but Jesus does.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, listen, okay, this is kind of how it works." And the profound part of this in all of it, I mean, we've talked about some really stuff that not a lot of people have the tolerance to be able to, to sit through and listen to, because as you said, it wrecks your constitution,
Yeah.
your religious constitution. But here's what is so cool. The invitation is there.
Yeah.
But
Ask him.
Jesus, what is this Elohim thing that he's talking about? Staggs is talking about this like it is a big deal.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Why is this important, Jesus?
Yep.
If I'm a part of the Elohim class, would you describe that to me? Would you teach me about that? Would you allow me to see this the way that you see it? You're the guy who created it. Why did you create me to occupy the Elohim class?
Yeah.
What is it to rule with you in your nature and character? What does that actually look like? Putting all the other stuff aside, what does that look like to you, Lord Jesus?
Yep.
Because if that's what you designed us to do, I want to do that.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know how to do it. I don't even know what it means, but I want to do that.
Yep. Well, it's amazing. It's amazing. Zachariah Sitchins he's the one that did the translation. He was one of the first to translate. Um, Basically, there were thousands upon thousands of these clay tablets that were found, and actually found in basically the region in which Moses grew up in, and visited much of his life. And when for a long time, it was the cuneiform tablets of the
Hmm.
Sumerians, and there was just so many of them that, like, in the context of our, human timetable, it doesn't fit. Like, you can't make that many.
Mhm.
And finding all this, almost like the Library of Alexandria, if you will, that there's this whole mass of information that we don't have access to. And he was one of these guys that, when he was in school as a kid, he I don't know if he was like the priest or whoever, he was in like some, Catholic school or something, or Hebrew school or something. He said, what is this? What is this? Sons of God, daughters of men thing? What is this Nephilim thing? And they're like, we don't talk about that. And he was, as a like a 12-year-old boy, was so frustrated because no one was willing to tell him what it was.
Yeah.
And so he basically spent the rest of his life trying to figure it out. Well, those that actually cracked the code, because I think what cracked the code was the Rosetta Stone, and that they were able to figure out what these cuneiform tablets were. Well, he was one of the ones, and he's a super controversial guy, of what does it actually say. And so when we look back and hear these stories, well, one of the stories that comes out of this is the story of the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki, when we look at the cultural things, we see these giants who wore wristwatches and carried these bags, and they're on different continents,
Mhm.
right? And you know what, the one of the big symbols of them is an acorn and a double helix.
Hmm.
And so you'll see these, they're winged, right? They're either shown as in fish costumes, or they have wings, and they're giants, and it's amazing, like, but they have a acorn, and it's next to essentially a double helix, which has basically the number of chromosomes we have.
Hmm.
And what's amazing, like, so when you say Elohim and creation and all this kind of stuff, well, what is the story that's been translated from those? That we were genetically engineered to be a slave race. And so that you throw this into it, right? This isn't in the Bible. This isn't like in the context of things. But I asked the Lord Jesus this question: why do I know about this stuff?
Yeah.
Why am I interested in this stuff? Why am I, and then I think about what's coming and what our role is in all of this, is to say, well, there's a pretty clear reason now why you shouldn't have any other gods before him, because there are many. And when I start seeing things like that and I start realizing, okay, when we find out, right, if we ever do, and understand who we are in the context of this, there it seems like there are many who have been enemies of us, and then there are many, and that God has done some amazing things to protect us. Because, I don't see portals opening up, or I don't hear the audible voice of God. I see the beauty of creation, right? Like this morning. And then I realize I don't live 900 years. I live maybe 100, maybe 120 max. And I go, okay, even being kicked out of the garden, there's provision.
Yeah.
And that just keeps me coming back to the fact that, as I read this story and understand that there is one who I can go to for whatever question I've got, that's very reassuring to me. And I've seen the fruit and evidence of that. But I do think that there are those who are set aside. And I don't even want to use any theological concepts when I say set aside, but when we talked of the ecclesia, those that were called out and chased after Jesus and dropped their nets and said, "Hey, yeah, I'm okay. You got my attention." I almost feel like we're doing the same thing now.
Yeah.
We're just literally saying, "You know what? You got my attention. Are you really one who speaks? Are you really one who asks questions of me and gives me insight and wisdom based on everything I've ever done for some purpose?" And that's the thing I think so many people are lost with, because right now, the thing that people are seeing as purpose is money.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh man, the financial system's changing. But in the context of everything you said, the common thing that anti-Christian people will say is, well, why does such a good God do so many bad things? And then you realize, hold on a second. It's for his plan, his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. It's his thing. And so I almost feel like, get in line. I want to be a part of his thing, because I've been going my way and it hadn't turned out so good.
Yeah.
I want to go his way. Steve, this has been dynamite. Dynamite. Um, yeah, and my wife's freaking out, so I'm gonna have to go attend to that. Thank you so much, Steve. This has been like mind numbing at a different level. So thanks for, spoon feeding this stuff to me because I feel like it's a lot. And so I appreciate everybody watching and paying attention and gleaning from this. Anything you want to kind of share with anyone as a summary or just encouragement?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you got to leave, so we'll keep it brief. I mean, stuff is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, this community is involved in cryptocurrency. Why? You're describing a disclosure this summer. Why? Um, the United States, America, is in deep yogurt. Why? I mean, there are all kinds of stuff happening that we happen to be the folks that have been assigned to this time.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good idea to find out why.
Yeah.
And then let Jesus prepare us to play our role that we've been assigned in our time. And crypto heartbeat is a part of getting that message out. Cryptocurrency is a part of the solution he's putting in place. We don't know what that entails or how it looks right now. And every person listening to this, this stream, there is a reason that Jesus wants you to hear this information. Whatever the reaction is that you're having inside of you right now, stick with it. Let him take you through it. See, because we'll have more conversations as time goes on. And at some point, all of this is going to make not only sense, but it's going to light your fire. Yeah. And you're going to see a purpose to your life that you never could even begin to conceive of. So hang in there. Stay the course.
That's awesome. Steve, thank you once again. Our ninth episode, our 18th hour of content. I appreciate it so much. And we're going to be doing this as many Fridays as the Lord allows, right, Steve?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll
Thanks,
catch you in a minute.
Okay. See you, folks.
Thanks, man. Folks, once again, another mind-blowing experience with Steve Staggs. It's so... I don't know if you've got someone in your life like Steve Staggs. I'm going to tell you, I didn't for a long time. I've got friends, and certainly, Mr. Ray is a encouragement to me, and we sharpen each other. But this idea of people have asked me over the years, "Are you growing?" And you know what? Yeah, I'm being stretched. But what's nice about it is you don't get stretched to the point where you break. And I feel like this is preparation for certain things. And there's certain people who watch this stuff and it doesn't resonate with you. It's not the right time. But for those that are intrigued by this, I feel like it breathes fresh air into my lungs as it relates to understanding the creation, right? Because everyone is preaching to the lowest common denominator. And there are some of us who are called to be curious and interested in these things and to know that there's one that we can go to who is alive and speaks. And that's the thing that is amazing to me. And so there's no formula. It's your interest and desire to engage. And so, you want to see how far the rabbit hole goes? Try them on for size. Thanks for joining the Pulse or Crypto Heartbeat or Right Side Up with Steve Staggs, episode 9. Take care of yourself. Have a great weekend. And we will catch you very, very soon. Take care of yourself and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.